The dog refused to leave the cemetery. Not after one day, not after 1 week, not even after strangers dragged him away 3 different times. Every single night, somehow, he returned to the same lonely grave, staring at one name carved into the cold stone, Mike. Then, on the 37th night, the dog suddenly lifted his head, let out a heartbreaking cry unlike anything anyone had ever heard, and began running. No one knew where he was going. No one knew what he had sensed. But the journey that followed would shatter thousands of hearts and prove that love can survive even when the world believes it has already died. If you believe kindness can change lives, if you believe every soul deserves a second chance, take a moment to like this story. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share it with someone who loves animals, and subscribe for more emotional journeys that remind us what humanity truly looks like. The dog's name was Shadow. He had not always looked like a ghost wandering through forgotten streets. Once, his black coat had shined beneath the afternoon sun, and his bright brown eyes had carried the fearless confidence of a dog who knew exactly where home was. That home belonged to Mike Harrison, a quiet mechanic whose small repair shop never made him rich, but somehow became the safest place in the neighborhood. Mike never walked past a hungry animal. He fixed bicycles for children who could not pay. He secretly repaired elderly neighbors' cars without charging them a single dollar. He lived simply, laughed rarely, but loved deeply. Shadow had found Mike years earlier as an abandoned puppy trapped beneath a collapsed wooden shed after a storm. While dozens walked past the frightened cries, Mike crawled through splintered beams until his own hands bled just to pull the tiny puppy into his arms. From that day forward, Shadow followed him everywhere, not because he was trained to, but because gratitude had become stronger than instinct. People often joked that Shadow wasn't Mike's dog. Mike was Shadow's human. Then everything changed on an ordinary Tuesday. Mike never came home. A drunk driver crossed into the wrong lane. The accident was instant. The silence afterward lasted forever. At the funeral, Shadow refused food. He refused water. As the casket disappeared beneath the earth, the dog dug frantically until exhausted hands gently pulled him away. Everyone cried. Everyone except Shadow. Some grief becomes too large for tears. For 37 days he waited beside the grave, surviving on scraps left by visitors who couldn't bear to watch him slowly disappear. Animal shelters tried rescuing him. Police officers carried him away. Volunteers adopted him. Each time he escaped. Each time he returned. Until that impossible night, when he suddenly stood up, sniffed the wind with desperate urgency, and ran. He ran with a purpose, as if somewhere in the distance, Mike was calling him. The town watched in disbelief as Shadow crossed highways, fields, abandoned railroads, and crowded intersections without hesitation. His paws bled against cracked pavement. Rain soaked his thin body. Cars narrowly missed him, yet nothing slowed him down. People began sharing videos online. The dog from the cemetery is running somewhere. Does he know something? Who is he looking for? Millions watched without realizing they were witnessing only the beginning. Nearly 80 miles away stood Blackwood Manor, home to billionaire Daniel Blackwood, a man admired for building one of the country's largest technology empires and feared for the icy walls surrounding his private life. Employees whispered countless stories about him. Some claimed he had no heart. Others insisted he simply buried it long ago. One rule inside Blackwood Manor stood above every other. Children were forbidden. No exceptions. No visitors. No family events. No employee was allowed to bring a child onto the estate under any circumstance. Anyone who broke the rule lost their job immediately. Nobody understood why. Daniel never explained. His expression never changed whenever children appeared on television or in advertisements. He simply looked away and left the room. The mansion itself reflected its owner. Perfect, silent, beautiful, empty. Working there was Elena Morales, a widowed maid raising 7-year-old twins, Noah and Lily, in a tiny apartment barely large enough for 3 people. Every paycheck disappeared into rent, groceries, school supplies, and overdue medical bills left behind after her husband's battle with cancer. She worked 16-hour days while pretending exhaustion did not exist. The twins never complained. They packed each other's lunches, shared blankets during cold nights, pretended stale bread tasted wonderful just to keep their mother smiling. Then, one morning, everything collapsed. Their babysitter suffered a stroke. Every neighbor was working. School was unexpectedly closed because of emergency repairs. Elena stared at the clock, panic flooding her chest. Missing work meant termination. Losing her job meant eviction. She had nowhere else to turn. With tears she could not let her children see, she made the impossible decision. She brought Noah and Lily to Blackwood Manor. She planned to hide them quietly inside an unused laundry room for just a few hours. No one would ever know, or so she prayed. At almost that exact moment, miles away, Shadow stopped running. His ears rose. His tired body trembled. His eyes locked toward the distant hills, where Blackwood Manor stood waiting. And somehow, the broken dog knew his journey was far from over. Shadow reached the towering gates just as security guards spotted the exhausted animal, collapsing onto the stone driveway. His ribs showed through his fur. His paws left tiny trails of blood. Every instinct told the guards to call animal control. Instead, the dog slowly lifted his head. His eyes settled on the mansion, not on the people, not on the food one guard placed beside him, only the house, as though someone inside mattered more than survival itself. Inside the mansion, Elena had hidden her twins exactly where she planned. They sat quietly between shelves of folded linens, whispering stories to each other while waiting for their mother to finish cleaning. Hours passed peacefully. Then, Lily heard something, a faint whimper. She carefully opened a side door leading toward the gardens. There lay Shadow, barely conscious. Without hesitation, the little girl wrapped her tiny arms around the frightened animal. Noah rushed to find water, while Lily gently stroked his trembling head. For the first time since Mike died, Shadow wagged his tail. It lasted only a second, but someone saw it. Daniel Blackwood, standing silently from the second-floor balcony. His face hardened instantly. Children, inside his estate. The one rule everyone knew. Security moved immediately. Elena's world fell apart before her eyes as guards escorted her and the twins into Daniel's office. She expected anger. She expected humiliation. She expected to lose everything. Daniel remained silent for a long time. His cold eyes rested not on Elena, but on Shadow. The dog had somehow forced himself upright despite his exhaustion and positioned his body protectively in front of Noah and Lily, just as he once protected Mike, just as Mike once protected him. Daniel stared. Something deep inside him shifted, only for an instant. Then it disappeared beneath years of carefully built emotional walls. Elena confessed everything, every unpaid bill, every sleepless night, every desperate choice. She accepted responsibility and begged only that her children not blame themselves. Daniel dismissed everyone without explanation. The household waited for the inevitable firing. Instead, nothing happened. Elena kept her job. The twins were quietly driven home. No announcement followed. No reason was given. Yet that night, Daniel reviewed old security footage again and again. Each replay showed the same moment. The starving dog shielding two frightened children. His hands began shaking, because 23 years earlier, another dog had done exactly the same thing. Back then, Daniel had not been a billionaire. He had been an ordinary father. His 8-year-old daughter, Emily, adored a golden retriever named Cooper. One rainy evening, Cooper blocked Emily from crossing a road. She laughed, thinking he wanted to play. Seconds later, a speeding truck lost control. Cooper pushed Emily away. The dog died instantly. Emily survived, but only for 6 months. A rare illness doctors failed to diagnose in time slowly stole her away. Daniels, Emily's wife, never recovered from losing both her daughter and the dog that sacrificed everything. Their marriage collapsed beneath unbearable grief. Daniel convinced himself that loving children only led to unbearable pain. So he buried every memory, built an empire, surrounded himself with walls instead of people, and banned children forever, because seeing them reopened wounds, he believed, had finally healed. Until Shadow arrived, until two frightened twins reminded him what innocence looked like, until memories refused to stay buried. The following morning, Daniel personally carried food to Shadow. The dog accepted neither food nor affection. Instead, he walked to Daniel, sniffed his hands, and suddenly ran toward an old storage wing no one had entered in years. Workers followed. The forgotten room contained dozens of dusty boxes. Inside one, Daniel found Emily's faded red sweater. Beside it lay Cooper's old collar. The billionaire collapsed to his knees. Years of frozen tears finally broke free. Every employee watching understood something extraordinary was happening. But no one yet understood why Shadow had led Daniel there. Not even Shadow himself. Because the journey had never been about replacing Mike. It had always been about healing someone else before it was too late. Yet the greatest revelation was still waiting. Hidden inside a single photograph no one had looked at in over 2 decades. Daniel picked up the old photograph with trembling hands. There stood little Emily. Beside her stood Cooper, and kneeling next to them was a young mechanic, smiling with grease-covered hands after fixing Daniel's broken family car for free. Mike. For years, Daniel had forgotten the stranger's name, but now every memory returned. When Emily was sick, hospitals drained every dollar Daniel owned. His business had not yet existed. His hope had nearly disappeared. Mike had quietly repaired Daniel's only vehicle again and again without accepting payment, because he knew the family needed every cent. He had never asked for recognition. He had simply helped. Daniel had promised himself he would repay the kindness someday. Life, tragedy, and success buried that promise beneath decades of pain. Shadow had unknowingly brought Mike's final gift back into Daniel's life. Not money, not possessions. Humanity. Daniel searched through public records until he found Mike's modest home scheduled for demolition, because no relatives had claimed it. Everything inside was about to be thrown away. He stopped the demolition immediately. Walking through the silent house, Daniel discovered notebooks filled with names. Every page listed people Mike had secretly helped. Families, veterans, single parents, homeless neighbors, animals rescued from abuse. Beside each name, Mike had written the same sentence: kindness only matters when nobody is watching. Daniel closed the notebook and cried harder than he had at his own daughter's funeral. Because he finally understood, Mike never became wealthy. He became unforgettable. Daniel established the Harrison Hope Foundation in Mike's honor, dedicating it to struggling families, abandoned animals, children's hospitals, and emergency assistance for single parents. Elena became one of its first community directors. She no longer cleaned empty hallways. She changed lives. Noah and Lily finally had a safe home, where laughter was never forbidden. The rule banning children from Blackwood Manor disappeared forever. Soon the mansion echoed with charity events, school visits, rescued animals, and smiling families. The silent palace became a place of healing. Shadow lived there too, not because Mike had been replaced. No one ever could. Every evening, Shadow still sat beneath the stars for a while, looking toward the distant horizon where his best friend once walked beside him. Love never forgets. It simply learns another way to continue. Months later, Daniel visited Mike's grave carrying fresh flowers. Shadow lay quietly beside the stone. Neither moved for a very long time. Daniel finally whispered the words he should have spoken decades earlier. Thank you. Not for fixing a car, not for saving money, for proving that one compassionate life can continue changing strangers long after that life is gone. As Shadow rested peacefully beside Mike's grave, he gently closed his tired eyes. He did not pass away. He simply slept. For the first time since losing the man he loved, his heart was finally at peace. Before this story ends, we want to hear from you. Have you ever lost someone who changed your life forever? Or has an animal ever shown you a love you could never forget? Share your story in the comments. Your words may comfort someone who needs hope today. If this journey touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe so more people can discover stories that remind us compassion is never wasted, love never truly disappears, and even the smallest act of kindness can change generations. Because sometimes the greatest journey is not the one that leads us back to the people we lost. It is the one that teaches us how to carry their love forward for the rest of our lives.